Welcome, Ruhee. I'm here with Ruhee Neog, who is a security and foreign policy analyst and the director of the Institute for Peace and Conflict Studies in Delhi. You have been publishing a lot of wonderful things on nuclear security. You've been following this issue, I guess, for the past few years. What do you think are, well, can you give us an Indian perspective on nuclear security? India participated in the nuclear security summits and has done actually a lot of work to improve nuclear security of its fissile material.
Yes. As you said, there's been a significant amount of work done, and I think the 4 nuclear security summits were very helpful in building the kind of momentum that was required to push individual countries to sort of relook at their nuclear security commitments. And, you know, this statement is often made, and it sounds like a bit of a cliche, but it's so absolutely correct, which is that nuclear security is only as strong as the weakest link in the chain. And I think the NSS process drove that home very well. So since then, our Department of Atomic Energy, the Atomic Energy Commission of India, have taken steps, have put out statements in the public domain regarding the kind of work that they're doing to secure fissile materials without going into too much detail.
Right.
And I think Fukushima in that regard also sort of pushed them to look at nuclear safety measures as, you know, two sides of the same coin. One of the things that was instrumental in this regard was the very high political visibility that the NSS process afforded countries like India. And we've made several statements at the 4 summits. There were voluntary gift baskets, as you know, and we've set up a nuclear security center of excellence, as it's called. And as I understand it, there is a significant amount of work being done within the aegis of that center that involves platforms for exchanges of best practices, etc., with other countries, with the scientific bureaucracies of other countries. So all in all, while there isn't too much written, I think since the NSS process sort of petered out on nuclear security governance and culture in India, I do understand that a lot is happening behind the screen, and certainly at the government-to-government level.
South Asia in particular has some security issues related to nuclear energy and nuclear weapons. There are facilities that are not under IAEA safeguards in both India and Pakistan. You know, if we broaden not just South Asia, but India often looks to China as a competitor. In some respects. China is has a very vibrant nuclear energy program, so does India. And China is about to embark on reprocessing of spent fuel for its civilian nuclear energy program. India has a particular view, I think, on nuclear energy and the fuel cycle, which is, you know, I said it's a particular view. It's actually a unique view, right? It has its unique plan. India is one of the few countries that is trying to develop a thorium fuel cycle. Without getting into too many technical details, India is kind of poised to move beyond, you know, light water reactors and more into fast reactors, which have the potential to breed plutonium, which is a material of concern. There's been a debate within the context of nuclear security about whether information exchanges are good for nuclear security or bad for nuclear security? And I think you quite rightly pointed out that sometimes there's a need to keep some information close hold because you don't want to give an advantage to terrorists. So I think there's a trade-off between, a little bit of a trade-off between transparency and security. But that said, given that we're not anywhere close to a treaty to stop producing fissile material for nuclear weapons, that the nuclear security summit process has ended, and there's kind of a hodgepodge of different organizations doing things, but no large scale or top level focus on these issues. I'm really interested in things that India and Pakistan might, and maybe even China together, might do among themselves to improve confidence in this area about the safety and security of fissile material. I'm not sure there are, I don't want to, I'm not sure there are very specific things, but I'm just as an analyst who's looked at these issues kind of broadly, what's your kind of assessment of the environment? Is it conducive to that now? If not, could it become conducive? What would be the right environment to make something like that work?
Personally, as an analyst and as someone who's invested in Southern Asian strategic stability, I think information sharing as a confidence building measure is very important. And while not much value is put on having talks for the sake of talks, unless you can come out with something more substantial, I think that in itself is actually a very substantial first step to inculcate the kind of trust or the atmosphere that you need to then proceed further down the confidence building route. Having said that, at this time, I am not sure the security, strategic, political environment between these three countries is ripe for discussions of this sort. India, Pakistan have not engaged in an authentic, thorough diplomatic dialogue in some time. To then envisage a scenario in which they're going to discuss nuclear security issues, even if they're completely kosher and have nothing to do with the nuclear weapons program, and then also to bring in China in the form of, let's say, a regional security architecture on nuclear security. While it is a brilliant idea, I'm not sure there is the appetite for that within the political establishment that is going to call the final shots in any case.
Is there any bandwidth for unilateral measures by India? And
in my estimation, at this time, I will hazard a no.
Because one of the ideas that I have proposed, not very popular idea, is that additional countries that have been producing civil plutonium join the international guidelines for plutonium management. India would be a candidate, Pakistan would be a candidate, not because of the weapons part of it, but because of its civilian plutonium. It's a heavy lift, I know.
Again, as someone who studies this, I see the value in India and Pakistan coming on board an initiative like this, if for nothing else than just to reaffirm their credentials or commitments that they've already made. But I think and this is of course my reading of what I think an Indian policy perspective could look like, I think there will be several arguments. In fact, the one I've just made could be turned on its head, which is if we've already made these commitments, why do we have to reaffirm it
Right.
To the same audience. And that may come from a place of course, one of the popular arguments is that it helps not just to establish your credentials and to establish further faith in your responsible nuclear status, it also helps you sort of mainstream, which is not a word I like, but that's the word in use. I think what I would expect a country like India to then say is that you are constantly asking of us to display our credentials, right? And when we do so, you shift the bar elsewhere. So where is this going to stop? And what does that give us in return? Because, of course, we have India's attempted membership of the Nuclear Suppliers Group, and that has been an ongoing process. And if I think there is no pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, it's going to get a bit difficult to get India to move realistically.
Yeah. That's understandable. You know, coming from the United States, we often, our diplomats often say, we've done many, many things on nuclear disarmament and other things, and it never seems to be quite good enough. I think the bottom line with respect to nuclear weapons and nuclear energy is that you just have to keep working at it.
Yeah.
But thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Shah.